We all
This
set?
conference will now be recorded.
Okay, let's bring this meeting to order. It's the April 7th, 2020 Newburyport Conservation Commission meeting located on GoToMeeting. In attendance are myself, Joe Texera, Steve Moore, David Vine, Dan Warshall, Paul Healy, and Douglas Muir. And this meeting is being recorded. The first item on the agenda are the March 17th, 2020 minutes. We have any comments or questions or anything?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Let's see. Let me call you off. Let's see. John Muir,
Yes.
Paul Healy,
Yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
David Vine,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
You forgot me.
Oh, I did forget that I called you second. Sorry. Stephen Moore?
Yes.
There were meeting minutes from another meeting, the last real meeting you had. You didn't do those at the one that was in the hallway?
We did not, which I'm not positive. We don't have them in front of us right now.
That was February 17th, I believe. Yeah, February 17th. I have them here, but you all might want to, if you haven't reviewed them yet, you might want to wait till the next meeting.
Yeah, let's note those for the next agenda. Okay. Next item. Do we have any Plum Island updates? Julie, your mic is off.
Sorry. I think I gave you a few of those Plum Island updates yesterday during our test meeting. And I spoke with Donna Holiday this morning, again, a little bit more about it. They are reaching out to MEMA and to the state and trying to get some emergency sand brought in to just essentially patch the holes and prevent additional flooding right now. It would really be 100% sacrificial sand, I think, at this point, but it would serve to protect the neighborhood, at least marginally, from additional high tides and storms that would, again, sort of breach that dune area. So whether or not that works or whether or not we're able to get that sand anytime soon remains to be seen. But that is one thing that they're working on for the area between 73rd and 75th Streets right now. And aside from that, I don't have any other updates on what's happening out there right now. You guys have seen the videos and photos, I'm sure.
Is there any action that we're supposed to do in regard to any of the emergency work as a Conservation Commission?
That's a good question, David. And right now, there's nothing that we need to do. Essentially, DPS has just shoveled some of the sand that went down into the street back up onto the dune right there. There hasn't been anything major done yet. If there is, I'm sure we will be brought in to do some sort of approval, whether it's an emergency approval or an amendment to the existing order of conditions for that area. I think at this point, the landscape has changed so much that I'm not really sure we can look at it even as the same situation anymore, but I will let you know if there's anything that commission needs to be involved in.
Okay. Any other questions?
So I watched the weather forecast just before the meeting, and they are predicting flooding in the next few days because it's the astronomical high tides with the full moon.
Oh,
That's not good.
Right. No. Yeah.
well,
Was there significant damage to homes? I mean, I know there was some flooding, but
There was significant damage to at least one home where it was so severely flooded that the homeowner is now living in a hotel. It was the home right behind the one at the front of the dune at the end of 75th Street. The one closest to the water is actually built up on pilings, but the one right behind it, which is actually lower down in elevation, is at grade. And that home in particular was severely flooded. A few
Now-
others also flooded, but I don't know that they are in the situation where they had to move out. I'm not sure.
Julia, that second home, the one back from the dune, looks like it's a fairly new one, at least from the images I saw. Is that your understanding? Or, I mean, curious about why it wasn't on pilings.
No, it's actually, maybe we're looking at two different houses. This one that is sort of the second one back at the end of 75th Street, second removed from the front of the dune, that one is an older home.
All right.
Older shingle at grade cement block that hasn't, not much has been done to it. And actually the person who lives there, it's been in his family for like 60 years or something. It was his parents' home. He lives there year round. So yeah, Andy's showing on the screen right now. It's that, I believe it's that one right there. Second one back on the right is the one at grade.
All right. Yeah.
It's very low down.
Yeah, it had a white door, as I recall, and there was a image of a wave kind of heading towards it and running into it.
Yeah, that was, I thought it looked pretty new too, Doug.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's just well
Where
maintained.
I'm not seeing on the image that Andy put up, I'm not seeing anything more. Where's the? Is it this one here?
Andy, can you circle on your
Yeah.
screen, the second house back at the end of
Is it
75th Street?
Is it that one? Well, I can't. I guess you don't see my cursor, but
Yeah, I know. Same. If you follow 75th Street all the way out, the last house on the right is the one that the water is on pilings and the water went under.
okay, then it is that one. Yeah, yeah, got it. Yeah. Okay. Well, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you might have also been looking at the one on 73rd Street, at the second one from the end on the left, because that one also received a lot of water. I'm not sure which photos we were, or images we were.
Well, there was one image where there was water running around the one on pilings, and then the rest of the image was showing the water running towards the one further back. And that's the one I was speaking of.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway,
I don't know how old it is. It has not been recently renovated.
okay.
Yep.
Julie, is that the one you're referring to?
Yes, that's the one. Thanks for circling it. Yeah. As far as I know, there's been no recent work on that particular house.
No, I was thinking about the one below it, which I think is the one Doug was looking at too. That,
Okay.
Not the one that's circled, but the one below that.
Yeah,
Oh,
because the guy who took the video was right in front of that, the really angular house. Yes, that one. And then he spun around and you watch the waves go down to that house.
okay. Well, it's hard to tell from the aerial what, it's hard to relate the aerial to the other images, but
Yeah.
anyway,
Okay.
whatever.
So,
Thanks.
any other Plum
I'll
Island
keep
updates?
you all up to date. I'll keep you up to date on all that.
Okay. All right, next thing is Jerry Mullins informal discussion that we're going to continue till the May 5th meeting at least. I don't know that we need a vote on that one since it's an informal discussion.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
In that case, let's head on to certificates of compliance, requested determinations, et cetera. First one is 251 Low Street Development, request for ORAD extension. And we got something, well, they need to reflag it and everything anyway, so the applicant asked to have it continued to May 5th. So if we can get a motion.
So
So moved.
Second,
Okay, who is that second?
Steve.
Okay. And the roll call will be Paul,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
and I vote yes also. Okay, next one is Nicole Young Nadeau, 6 Bain Lane, Revocable Trust, 6 Bain Lane, request for a certificate of compliance.
Yeah, so, well, let me unmic, oh, okay, you can hear me. 6 Bain Lane, the certificate of compliance. I left this one on the agenda as one that you could possibly handle tonight because I believe that it's a project that was completed in compliance with the order as issued and the plans. There were a couple of minor changes that they made. They sort of squared off this, and you can't see my pointer, I'm pointing to it right now, but the 2-story garage that you can see on the left of the structure, to the left of that cobblestone entry driveway, that's the new addition that they had proposed and that the commission approved. It was changed slightly in configuration. There was a slight jog in the rear wall of the garage, squared off. And in squaring that off, they also shrunk the overall size of the garage so that there's actually less of an impact within the buffer zone than that was approved. So that was one change. They, what were some of the other ones? I have to pull up my notes. If you can hold on a sec here. Let's see, so it was 100 square feet smaller than the approved structure. And they made some small changes to the landscaping as well, the pathways and the planting. They had proposed some tree plantings. They didn't do the exact species, but they did more plantings of different species. They planted some arborvitaes in a different location. But in all, it was really, it was work in an area that was already disturbed lawn. And so I would say that basically this project was, there's no wetlands violations, there are no issues with how they did it, there's less impact. I would recommend issuance of a COC on this one.
I'll make a motion to issue a certificate of compliance.
Second, Doug Muir.
All in favor, Paul,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Julie, you want to send that document around for us to sign?
Yeah, you know how I always try to get you to sign things, so now we don't have to worry about that, right?
True enough.
We'll figure
All right, the next item, can I get a motion to open the public hearings?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, Paul,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Okay, the first item is Lee's Reed, Newburyport Parks Department, 40 Low Street, notice of intent. You have anybody from there or?
Lisa's not
There's
on.
someone from, yeah, there's someone from Stantec for the rail trail project, but I don't believe anybody else is on here for that project right now.
Okay. So we need to vote on a variance for this?
We do.
Yeah. The variance language I sent to you, it was also in the, it's on the website, but I also sent it to you in my notes for the meeting. You have all the detailed variance language that they went through. If anyone doesn't have it in front of them, I'm happy to read out what those findings are.
No, I have it.
Yeah,
Are there any?
I'm satisfied with the language and the findings.
That seemed to be reasonable.
Were there any other remaining questions that you all had? I wasn't at that February meeting. I know you had been asking about the stormwater, and we got the stormwater peer review from Phil Christensen. So
Right.
that's been signed off on. Was there any questions related to that?
No, I didn't have any.
Yeah, I think we were all set. We were just kind of waiting for the language of the variance and then for the stormwater report.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
well then I for you with reading it.
Okay. Do we have any more comments on that? Questions?
Are there any special conditions, Julia?
I actually have the draft special conditions for that. Let me just see. I didn't notice any special conditions from the minutes or when I listened to the recording of the February meeting. I'm just going to quickly open in front of me the draft special conditions that I put together. It's really just our standard special conditions, things like erosion controls, inspection, and that kind of thing. No stockpiling within resource areas or the 25-foot no disturb zone. But aside from those standard special conditions, I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything from you from that February meeting in addition. So if you don't have anything else now, we can just leave it with our boilerplate ones.
Yeah, I don't have anything. All right, hearing none.
I'll
Are there
move to approve an order.
I'll first ask if there is anybody from the public wants to speak. Not hearing or seeing anything. Doug's motion is on the table.
And we have to close the hearing first.
Oh, you're correct.
Motion to close the hearing.
Second.
All in favor, Paul,
Excuse me, yes?
Steve,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
and I vote yes too. Okay. Next item is Paul Hogg, Harbor Master, Northern Boulevard, Plum Island Point, notice of intent. We did get some photos from Paul today, but we will be continuing this to the May 5th meeting.
Yeah, I'm going to get back in touch with Paul. Actually, he was meant to give us an actual plan that showed the revised elevations of the shed. That's really what we needed. The photographs are fine, but we need a plan for the file that shows the revised elevations. So I'm sure he'll be able to get that to us by May 5th.
Okay. Get a motion to continue?
So moved.
Second,
Okay, all in favor, Paul,
yes?
Steve,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Okay, next item is Graham Sharp, 9K Street, notice of intent.
Okay, Graham Sharp obviously is not here tonight. I said that the commission would maybe be able to handle this without him at the meeting, because what you had needed from him was the mitigation area, a proposed area to mitigate for the loss of vegetation from the proposed deck expansion at the back of his house. And so he provided this plan that Andy's got up on the screen, showing the location for the same square footage of vegetation to be lost. And if you scroll down, Andy, I think in that same document, there's also a couple photos that show in more detail the location where the deck is going, yeah, and then the location where he'll be doing mitigation planting. So to me, that looks adequate. But I don't know if you had any other concerns about this project or that was your final issue with it.
Yeah, I think that was a,
Just one question. It looks, the image on the right is where the mitigation is going to go, correct?
yes.
Yes.
It looks like there's a lot of area where there could be even more vegetation there. I'm not sure whether that makes sense or not. I mean, would the required mitigation occupy most of that space on the right or not?
Well, he doesn't have it marked out that way on his plan. It shows a sort of an even square footage for the replacement, but at the same time, that aerial photo.
Yeah, from the aerial, it looks like it's so roughly he's going to plant something in most of the mitigation area, I guess.
Yeah, it looks like that he's going to plant most of that bare area from the aerial, but then when you look at the photograph itself, it looks like there's a bit more bare ground than.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know whether we ought to be requiring or suggesting more than just is it a 1-for-1 or?
Technically, it's a 1-for-1. You haven't required, I mean, occasionally, I think you've required like a 2-for-1 if there's other circumstances where they need more mitigation, but typically it's a 1-for-1 that you all have.
I guess my question is, what's the point? Go back to the aerial for a second. What's the point of leaving a small section of bare ground unvegetated? If you look to the, I don't know, is it to the right, I guess, of the mitigation area, the rectangular, you see another big patch of bare ground. Why not suggest that he plant that as well?
You could certainly put that in as a condition in the order of conditions. I don't think that it would be something he would object to, given the size of the area. It's relatively small anyway. I don't see why he couldn't plant a little bit more beach grass if you asked him to do so.
Yeah, I mean, as long as he's going to be out there planting, I mean, you know, another 50 plugs of beach grass or whatever it is, I don't know. Seems like it makes sense.
Best rate wasn't that good also.
Oh.
How would you want to phrase that in a special condition that the applicant shall plant? I don't know if you want to say the entire bare area adjacent to the tree line.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a little hard to refer to it like that, I think, because if you look towards the road from the mitigation area, you know, it's not totally bare, but there's not a lot of vegetation there either. And we're not suggesting he revegetate or add vegetation to a huge area, or I'm not. I'm just wondering about that bare area.
So what if
You
we,
know what the area is right now that represents for square footage or whatever?
Square footage, I don't know. I don't even know what the direction is. Is that east, west, south of the mitigation area?
Well, I'm just saying if he has, say, 500 square feet now, maybe make it 800 square feet or something of that.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I could scale it out too and put a number on that.
I mean, I don't think that's an unreasonable condition, and I think he'd probably agree. As you said, Julie, I think he'll agree to it.
Yeah. Make it 1.5 to 1 or something like that, and I can scale. You could make the condition be something like that, and I can scale it out and put a number in there for the order.
And you could even show him a sketch of what we have in mind in terms of where it would be.
Yep.
Go on.
I can do that.
sure.
The deck that he's adding is 7 by 16, so it's 112 square feet. That certainly looks like it's bigger than 112 in that, but
I
so
don't know.
asking him to go to 800 might be more than he's willing to do.
Yeah.
You
No,
could
no, I
say,
think we were saying 1.5 times what, you know, what he was covering
I
up
was
by
just picking 500 as a for instance. I
Right.
didn't know what the area was.
Yeah.
What did you say that was square footage wise, Paul?
It's 112.
Steve, sorry, it's 112. So why don't we say 200 square feet?
Yeah,
Yeah.
That sounds reasonable.
And perhaps we could control it by, in the special conditions, saying that he should present to you, Julia, a plan, a sketch of where he's actually going to plant the 200 square feet.
Yeah. I can put a condition in that he has to submit a revised plan prior to start work for approval. Does that work?
Yep.
So it would be 200 square
Sounds
feet,
good.
200 square foot planting area, and a revised plan to be presented to the administrator prior to start of work.
sounds good.
Okay.
Do we have anything else? Hearing nothing. Anything from the public? Hearing nothing or seeing nothing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
And Paul,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
I vote yes. Okay. Next item is Jordy Vining, Clipper City Rail Trail Phase 2, request for amendment.
Hello there. Can everyone hear me?
And now,
Yep.
Did I dive right in, Julie and Joe?
absolutely.
Yep, go for it.
We have our consultant team here also. I'm not looking at everyone's little box here, but I think we have Ann and Elise from Stantec and David Smith from GZA. So I think everyone here is pretty familiar with this project and the evolution of this project, but I thought I'd try to give a quick recap, I suppose, and maybe a little status update, and then sort of turn it over to the consultants to walk through the plans associated with the request here to amend the order of conditions. Does that sound fine?
Sure.
Okay. So let's see. I think everyone's familiar with the trail project that's been in progress over the years, and for this shoreline piece, I think, as you'll all recall, the construction of this facility was halted a couple years back because of the discovery of the PCBs in a section there behind the wastewater treatment facility, and then the next blow was some pretty significant erosion of the coastal bank there from a couple storms in 2018. There's been some previous amendments, as you'll recall, on the order as we dealt with those couple of issues, including the temporary shoreline stabilization, and again, as I think everyone will remember, the state-run project, the state contractor, the Mass DOT project, was essentially wrapped up because there was a general consensus that we needed to rework this area, replan and repermit this section to figure out what we were going to do, given the extent of the erosion that was happening and coming across the old rail corridor towards up to the fence line of the wastewater treatment facility. So let's see, in terms of the PCB cleanup, that's still ongoing. We are slowly getting there. That basically, we mobilized the contractor in December, and they've they've been working on it essentially for the past few months. We initially thought we'd have one round of excavation and then transport and disposal. And then it's an iterative process where we have to have someone go back and do post-excavation sampling and lab analysis to see, did we get it all or do we need to do some more? So we had to go back for a second round, sort of a smaller mobilization, but a second round of excavation. And at this point, we are, this thing has been pretty complicated by the presence of the underground electric lines. Andy's just pulled up a drone shot there. So we're in the process. There is still a little bit of PCB contamination in this section. However, we're dealing with getting right down next to the underground electric line duct banks. And there's a sort of obvious public safety issue of getting too close to these underground lines, undermining them, etc. So we're basically, our LSP is in discussions with EDP and EPA right now as to, and we basically say, all right, we've done what we can, what's feasible. We're going to cap it with 2 feet of clean fill, put in a geotextile covering, impose an activity and use limitation, and then through the project that we're talking about right now, the subject project, we're going to add another 3 or 4 or even 5 feet of fill on top, plus the asphalt trail on top, and it should be well.
Jordy, a threshold question about the PVC, the contamination. Will the revetment idea and enable you to do less by way of mediation of the contamination than you would otherwise have to do if you weren't going to go that way?
Yeah, the part of the argument that the LSP is making to the regulatory authorities is that we're going to have this subsequent project where we build this revetment and the associated berm, and that will further or cover up, this material under a lot of stone and a lot of fill. So that is part of the overall approach to make the case that this is a safe and efficient approach.
So in other words, in terms of closing out the site, you're capping and putting an AUL on rather than removing the rest of the contamination.
Yes, because it's essentially, we've gotten to the point where it's essentially impossible we can't move the duct bank. We can't move the direct buried cables that have been there since 1930. And so seeing those as fixed points, essentially, we're coming down to getting as much as we can. We're going to have to see whether the EPA and maybe the DEP essentially forces us to try to scrape a little bit more. We'll see how that goes, but part of the argument is we're going to end up with a pretty robust situation here in terms of all this coverage, and we're ending up in the same place no matter what we do going forward.
Yeah. Jordy, has somebody investigated the integrity of the duct bank? I mean, before you cover it up with stone and fill and everything else, I mean, what kind of condition is it in? Does anybody know?
It seems to be in fine condition. We've been in touch with National Grid's civil supervisor. He's been out to the site a number of times. It's not very old. It's only, I think it was installed in maybe 2003 or so 15 plus years ago. And the picture that Andy pulled up there shows the erosion in 2018 seeming to come right up to the duct bank, and you can see that tape there that's annotated on the image. But
right.
but the actual duct bank hasn't been disturbed by either the scouring or the remediation activities. So the duct bank itself is a pretty robust piece of infrastructure, and that appears to be
that investigation is all based on what? Just observation? Nobody's excavated anything, right?
Yeah, well, we've been excavating down next to it and trying to keep a certain distance from it. So there's no indication that there's anything wrong with the duck bank, and we have to, as I think I was saying, we have to be careful that we're not undermining it. We can only go down so far next to it. We're trying to slope away next to it and so forth, so that we don't have integrity.
Right. No, my only concern, reason for asking this is be ashamed to put all this very expensive stuff on top of it and then find that it's failed for whatever reason.
I really don't think there's any concern about that, and they build these things to stay in there, indefinitely for decades, and they have a manhole system for accessing them. So,
Okay.
Yeah. So when it's covered up, they never intend to go back down and do anything to it.
So at least through the manholes, they can investigate from time to time if they need. All right.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 It's built so they never intend to actually excavate in order to get access. Maybe should have said that. The manhole and duct system, as they call it.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. So that's essentially the status of the PCB work. So we're coming hopefully to a conclusion relatively soon on that. So on a parallel track, we've been working on the planning and permitting for revising our approach to this shoreline here. Part of the rail trail project has been essentially combined with the climate adaptation planning that's been going on for the past couple of years in the community, and with the focus on the wastewater treatment facility. That other slide that Andy just pulled up, that shows the scouring that was the worst part of the scouring from those couple of storms in 2018. Those are the areas that we plugged with the temporary shoreline stabilization gabion baskets. And so the general consensus arrived at maybe about a year ago, I guess, with our consultants GZA and Stantec, as well as the city's additional consultant Dewberry, which was hired with municipal vulnerability preparedness grant to do a detailed risk analysis and focused study and recommendations on how to protect the wastewater treatment facility. The outcome of that has been the approach that's most cost effective and most feasible is to rebuild this revetment and this elevated berm. Andy, maybe if I could ask you to go back to the first couple of slides that shows the old railroad. Yeah, there we go. So that's one shot 20 years after the railroad was built in 1892 from Water Street, showing seeing the vertical granite block wall that extended out along the new shoreline that the railroad created on filled tidelands there. And then if you go to the next slide, Andy, in 1907, well, actually that's a current view that shows the same wall, and then as it heads northwest towards the American Yacht Club, you can see, even though it's small in this image, the stone starting to unravel as it goes north. And in the foreground here, obviously, is the salt marsh and the Joppa soapstone revetment and seawall. The next slide, Andy, if you don't mind, is a picture from 1905 showing the area, the corridor, looking in the other direction, southeast towards Joppa. And 2 years after that, a permit was received from the state to place slope. And in that, there's the image there from the license.
Jordy,
So,
excuse me, the previous slide, the one with the double rail trail, the area to the right is that where the wastewater treatment plant is now? Where there's like a pool of water?
Yeah. So when the railroad originally built it, they didn't entirely fill in everything, and then that was filled in the ensuing decades. I was just mentioning this 1907 license for riprap. So basically, a sloped stone revetment was added to as additional protection to the vertical seawall along the length of the shoreline here. And we're not aware of work that's, I mean, we know that some other stone has been sort of put out there over the years, but there hasn't been much of a substantial effort to maintain this structure for many years, many decades. The wastewater treatment facility was built around 1960, if I'm remembering right. The railroad itself was abandoned a decade after that in 1972. And if you click to the next slide, Andy, I think it shows the couple images of from the ground level of, yeah, there we go, of the sort of remnants of the stone, and some of that stone starting to fall down, being pushed around. And so part of our project is to pull back this stone out of the beach area, which will improve the prospects, presumably for the salt marsh in some of that area. Use some of that stone to rebuild this revetment and to raise it to a level, this appropriate level of 14 feet. I guess just quickly, part of the alternatives analysis was that there's not room to build a berm inside the wastewater treatment facility. You can see how close some of the structures and buildings come to the fence and to the shoreline. And we've positioned this thing trying to keep it basically as far away from the salt marsh as possible. So it's not going to impact the salt marsh. It's above the line. But we also need to stay away from that duck bank. So we sort of adjusted the plan so that it's in between those rock and a hard place. And in terms of the height of the structure, that's based off of the existing FEMA base flood elevation of 12 feet for the wastewater treatment facility, and 14 feet for the rail corridor. So Water Street is 13 and a half feet. And so part of the analysis is it doesn't make sense to build a 20-foot berm and revetment because water would essentially just go around it onto Water Street and do an end run. So the appropriate level at this point was settled at of 14-foot revetment, 14 and a half foot berm with the trail on top, and that addresses the current FEMA base flood elevation vulnerability, as well as gives us a little bit of room for sea level rise in the coming decades. Newbury was using the projections of intermediate high, I think, from NOAA, and obviously there's lots of opinions, and I hear them almost every day from abutters and other people about what will actually happen. But that's the pre-board planning that we're trying to include in this. Unless there's a question for me, maybe at this point, rather than my just doing a monologue here, I can pass this on to Stantec and then GZA to walk through the plans. Does that make sense? Is that good for everybody? Yeah.
Yep.
Fine with me.
Elise and Anne, do you want to speak to the plans and then turn the mic over to Dave, and he can talk about the revetment?
Yes, this is Anne McMenemy. I'm the wetland scientist on the team from Stantec. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Good, because I couldn't connect through the audio on the screen. I've got the visual, so I've got my phone for the audio. I just wanted to be sure. First of all, let me address the priority habitat that is mapped out in this area. We've been in touch with Natural Heritage. First, in the fall, we took the project back to them, and we received a letter that made a determination that the project would not be considered a take. And then we're also in the process right now of working through an E&F that we filed. We had our scoping session yesterday, or our virtual site walk, I guess, is maybe a more appropriate term for it, that Julia and the chair participated in. And we've received on April 2nd another email that was also copied to the commission from Natural Heritage that reviewed the revised request for an order of conditions, amended order of conditions, and they said that the proposed amendments are consistent with the previous determination and that the division has no additional comments at this time. As Jordy mentioned, I think a key point is that we worked real hard in the design to avoid the impacts to the salt marsh that's out there, trying to keep the footprint as compact as possible. I don't know if you have paper copies of the request for an amended order of conditions in hand, but on page 7 of 14, there's a little table that spells out the impacts, which are all permanent. We don't have any temporary impacts. The impacts to riverfront area and to land sewage to coastal storm flowage are identical because they're overlapping footprints at 55,610 square feet. The coastal bank is now 930 linear feet, which consists of a couple subcomponents consisting of 36 linear feet of new wall, 15 linear feet of resetting the existing wall at the connection to the new revetment, and 879 linear feet of new revetment. The only other resource area that has work proposed in it is Coastal Beach, which is for mainly foot traffic, but for constructability. And that is 3,800 square feet. I did receive a call, as did Jordy, from one abutter, and I did not get to speak with the person I did not get to speak to him in person. We exchanged messages, but Jordy did speak with him. It's a person at 179 Water Street. I don't know if you want to describe your discussion, Jordy.
Sure. I've been working with the abutters for many years on the project, so have periodically checked back in. This is talk. So the question he was focused on was what was happening essentially right in front of his property. So Stantec did a little analysis of how high the trail is going to be above the existing grade. We'd always been planning for the trail to be about a foot above the existing grade as it heads northwest from Joppa, and essentially holding to the existing height of Water Street there. So basically we were able to show him that the height of the trail along that portion of the old corridor is, for the first 75 or 100 feet is 6 to 12 inches, and the average is 1.16 inches, I think it was. And then as it gets to Charlie Griggs, in front of Charlie Griggs' property, it ramps up to about 2 feet on its way up to the 14-foot level. So he was fine with that. I've also talked with him over the years about plantings and their recommendation and desire to see shrubs out there that are low and won't obstruct the view and so forth. And so that was taken into account in Stantec's planting plan as well.
And this is Ann McMenemy again. And so we were working hard to complete a planting plan, which was submitted to the commission today. I know Jordy's been working with a lot of stakeholders about suggestions about or recommendations about what plants have been successful along the coast in the city before. And my suggestion or recommendation to the commission is that since you're just getting the planting plan today, that perhaps you could include a special condition that allows for the final planting plan, allows for you to have time to review it, but also for the final planting plan to be submitted prior to construction. If you would entertain that special condition, we'd appreciate it.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Oh, yeah.
Believe. Okay, so checking. Same thing happened to me. I couldn't connect on the audio, so I called in. So yeah, just to touch on what Ann's saying, I'm just going to speak to the trail, and then I'll hand it off to Dave Smith from GZA to talk about the revetment more specifically. But as far as the trail is concerned, there's about a 1,200-foot gap of the trail that was previously constructed. We're looking to match the same typical section. I believe there was page 4, sheet 4 of the plans that had a typical section on it, and it shows 10-foot wide paved with 2-foot grass shoulders on each side, maintaining that 12-to-1 slope for recovery as part of a bike safety. And then one of the questions that came up on the scoping session for the ENF yesterday was how much of a, I'll say, landscape area is there between the trail and the revetment. And that kind of varies along this stretch. As you know, it pinches down at one point, but generally there is, I would say, anywhere between like 8+ feet, usually between where the revetment starts and where the edge of the pavement of the trail is. And then on the side of the wastewater treatment plant, we are looking to slope down and meet there. And then we are actually getting some additional spot grades and survey as part of the PCB construction to confirm how the site is going to be left out there. And then we will just be confirming ultimately the drainage patterns, and that we are going to kind of maintain what has happened today and where, everything is drained from that site and even from the former rail corridor, so that we're not impacting anything with meeting the new elevation out there.
I would just jump in there.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to note that we've been working fairly closely with the DPS on that, the
Great.
engineering department and Chris Pratt and everybody else. And at their recommendation, they felt that we needed updated survey information for not only the rail corridor where we've been working, but inside the treatment plant. So because of the work that's been done there the past couple of years, so we did mobilize Bryant Associates to get updated survey information out there to make sure that our low points and high points and our drainage patterns are going to work in that area. So I just thought I'd add that.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. George,
yeah, go for it.
Sorry, this is Julia. When you say that you're doing the surveys and looking to make sure that the drainage patterns will still work through this area, are you talking about the drainage patterns from the previous design and you're hoping that those patterns work the same way? Or did you do a completely new drainage design based on this revised plan?
We are going to be looking at it from the revised plan. Ultimately, we've taken what was part of the previous design and we've reworked it based on the revetment design through here and ultimately what we want to accomplish. So as Jordy had mentioned, with the changes on the site of the wastewater treatment plant, and then just knowing that there's a contractor out there right now that is excavating and putting clean soil back, we just want to confirm that what is the new existing out there will not be impacted negatively by the proposed design. So this takes into account the anticipated existing survey of what the contractor out there is supposed to hit. However, we are getting those additional spot grades on the wastewater treatment plant property that we'll just be able to kind of confirm how the drainage pattern is, and as Jordy said, where the high points are, where the low points are, and that we aren't creating a new low point anywhere.
Okay.
In that regard, could you explain in plan view what the drainage patterns are, as far as how the water exits behind the berm or landward of the berm?
Yeah, I had the same questions. I couldn't really find it on the plans.
Yeah.
So if you look on the sheet that's up on the screen now, do you see the thick black line with the arrows on it that has look at
What is it? Sheet
pattern.
5?
Yeah.
What number is this, please?
This is on sheet Hang on. My computer's delayed.
Sheet 5.
Yeah,
Sheet 5.
Okay, because I can't up to
Sorry.
scale what I see on the screen, so I have to do this
Yeah.
on another.
No, that's fine. I have like a bunch of things open on my screen as well. So if you look at the line, we showed how the drainage is currently going based on the survey we had previously. And it ultimately it's that line with the long dash and the two short dashes, and it shows the direction of where we anticipate the water to go. When we submitted 25% to the city this winter, 25% design level plans, which is virtually what you're seeing here, there was a few questions that came out of it about work that was done in the wastewater treatment plant, and wanted to ultimately confirm that this is accurate, and that if there's any other grading we need to do on that side of the trail to ensure that we're not going to be pooling water there, which is the reason for these additional grades.
Now you have what, a couple of catch basins on the wastewater side, which carry water ultimately under the site to the river. Is that what's there now, you think?
That's correct.
Yep.
Yeah, there's
And
several
where is
Outfall
the-
Pipes.
Where is the outlet right now to the river? And where is it? It looks like it's going in both directions here. Where is it outlet in the other direction?
In terms of going to the river, I believe there's 3 outlets that will be coming through the revetment. Dave Smith can probably is best equipped to speak to that. But we went and inspected all of those with the DPS as part of our planning here.
So, Jordy, those are all functional?
Correct. Yeah, there's no way to really modify them, given where the underground electric lines are. So that they're, we did explore that with John Eric and the engineering department about whether there was the ability to shift or move any of these things, and the conclusion, from both on the city side as well as our consultant side, was it's going to function fine, and we don't really have the ability to modify those stormwater outlets. So our focus has been on just making sure, as Elise was outlining, that our grading is going to be appropriate on the inland side, so that the water gets caught by the existing grading and the existing catch basin system. Elise, anything else on the berm and the trail before we turn it over to Dave Smith about the revetment?
No, I don't think so. I would say, I think between you and everything was pretty much covered. So I would say it's probably a good time to turn it over to Dave to talk about the revetment.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Hey, everyone. I'm going to check the microphone. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm David Smith from GZA, part of the consultant team. As a sub-consultant of Stantec, helping out the city on this project. Our role in this project is the revetment design to be able to protect this the rail trail, and our design, actually, I'll start kind of in the southern end of the rail trail system, and approximately about 175 feet from Water Street and the Joppa seawall there. As you saw in the earlier photos, it's a granite stone wall that runs along that shoreline, and it actually isn't in that bad a shape, but about 175, 180 feet in, it starts to ravel away, as we saw in the other photos. The wall is just with stone that's kind of raveled out onto the beach. So at that particular point there, there's this 15-foot section of that granite block wall that's going to be rebuilt, and that's just going to be rebuilt and reset in kind. A couple of the stones have fallen off, and and we feel they can easily just be just reconstructed right within that 15-foot stretch. As you go further to the north, the wall pretty much crumbles away and it's non-existent in that location as it continues all the way to the north to the yacht club. It's just a jumbled mesh of partial revetment and wall stones. And for that 36-foot section beyond the 15-foot repair section, we're going to rebuild that wall. It's going to have a concrete footing, and we're going to rebuild that wall back up to the original height of what the wall is, utilizing the existing stones that are there and also some supplemental stones. And the reason why we're building a wall in this section is the salt marsh is pretty close to the structure at this point. So if we were to start our revetment there, our toe of the revetment would need to go further out, which would impact the salt marsh. And as Jordy indicated, you know, we tried very hard in this layout and the design to avoid any impact with the salt marsh during construction and push this revetment as far landward as we could with the constriction of the duck bank. So we kind of had to really fit it into two constraints on the seaward side and the landward side. So in that particular area there, it'll be a vertical wall. And then beyond that to the north is where the stone revetment will start in. It'll transition into the vertical wall, so the revetment will actually go past it and wrap into the wall itself, and then also on the back side of the wall. So we'll have kind of a, you know, you can't just abruptly stop one and add the other. So it'll be a transitional area right there. And from that point onward, for a distance of 879 feet along the shoreline, all the way to the American Yacht Club is where we're going to construct the revetment. It's going to be, we're going to have it as 3 to 5 ton stones are going to be along a 1.5 to 1 slope. We'll have 4 to 6 ton as a toe stone, which will be embedded into the ground below the existing grade. And then from that point, the slope would come up to elevation 14. And that's about a 1/2 foot lower than what the rail trail grade would be that's landward of that. We tried very hard to maintain 5 feet clearance from that duck bank. In some locations, we get down as close to 4 feet. And again, we were trying to balance the, you know, keeping it as far landward as we could to avoid any salt marsh impacts, but also maintaining a certain clear distance from that duck bank. So for the most part, that the stone revetment, we'll check out, we can go to the cross-section sheets in a minute, but in this particular, in the screen there, you can see where you'd see the hatch of the stone, and then there's kind of a block on the landward side of it before it gets to the rail trail. So in that particular location, the slope of the revetment is going to come up 1.5 to 1 to elevation 14. Then we're going to have like a level stone that comes back, almost like a capstone that runs that length along the backside. On the left part of the screen there, you don't see it, and that's because we're so close to the duck bank, we wouldn't be able to install that. So in that revetment location, it's just the slope's going to come up and tie into the existing grade. And that's similar to the revetment that's down at Cashman Park. That's set up the same way. So again, you know, running to the north, it's going to be a pretty uniform revetment along the length. The distance, you know, from the duck bank varies, you know, minimal of 4 feet. It can get up to almost 10 feet. But we didn't want to go further back, and you know, the shoreline now kind of undulates along the shoreline. We want to maintain a pretty consistent and uniform path for this revetment. We didn't want to jog in and out as we're going down the length. I don't know, Andy, can you go to the other sheet that would bring us to the north? Yeah, great. So in this particular stretch, where we get closer to the American Yacht Club, the rail trail comes down in elevation from that 14.5, and it meets up with the existing grade behind the American Yacht Club and the existing path that's there now. We have to maintain ADA accessibility, so that trail is going to slope down. The revetment will also slope down. It'll go from elevation 14 down to elevation 11, where it meets up to the bulkhead at the American Yacht Club. The Yacht Club just improved on their bulkhead recently. They raised their bulkhead up from about elevation 9 to elevation 11. Our original design was actually 9 to tie into theirs and not go any higher than theirs, but since they raised theirs, we're going to do the same to the revetment and actually have it where they blend in height at that point. Where the last probably 100 feet of that revetment, where I described where the slope's going to come up 1.5 to 1, you'll have a level capstone. In that particular stretch, it's actually going to come down on the land side as well. We'll have a little revetment berm there where it would meet up with the American Yacht Club because of the fact that the existing grade on the backside is lower in that area. There are 3 outfall pipes, as Jordy had mentioned. We're not going to do anything different to them, with the exception of extending the pipes, and 2 of them, I believe, just so that the pipe extends out beyond to the revetment face. There will be level flat stones placed at the bottom at these outfall pipes at 2 locations. The other location, any drainage will come right down on top of the toe stone that's there. But that will help to alleviate any erosion that would potentially exist. Right now, there's not a whole lot of flow, I don't think, that comes out of those pipes, just very isolated within just where that flow leaves the pipe. There might be a little swale that kind of meanders down to the coastal beach under the marsh, but for the most part, we're just going to put a flat stone there right at the base of the pipe. The revetment is going to be, the toe of the revetment is going to be for the majority of the length above mean high water, with the exception of that area in front of the screen. There's about 150 foot section where it's just below mean high water at that location. We're envisioning construction. Hopefully it can kind of progress how I just described it, start at the southern end, and access would be all from the land side with an excavator that would be able to excavate the slope, the area to receive the stone. There's going to be filter fabric that's going to be placed. There's a 1.5 foot thick bedding layer of 12 to 18 inch thick stone. And then the armor stone, which will be 3 foot in thickness, will be on top of that after the toe stone is placed. And hopefully the work can kind of progress from south to north. They would utilize that whole rail trail corridor. Fill would be brought in at the same time for building up the rail trails, at the same time the revetment's being built. And we envision, like I said, an excavator doing the majority of the work. There'll probably be a loader going back and forth to deliver stones to the actual work site. We don't anticipate all the stone being delivered at once. It'll come in multiple shipments, and just because of the limited workspace in that area. But I guess there's also a potential staging area on the land side of the American Yacht Club, and Jordy can provide a little bit of description on that. But that's basically, you know, the work that we're proposing. The existing stones that are out there, the suitable ones, we're going to reuse. We're anticipating about 25% of the volume will be reusing those existing stones. And if you remember seeing the image, the drone image after the 2018 storm event, you can see where a lot of that stone is raveled out onto the beach. We're going to recover that. Even the stone that's not going to be usable, we're going to recover that stone that you see there. So that white line, I believe, is probably the high tide line. It looks like where ice is formed in this photo, and you can see it's just a jumbled mesh of stone out there, a lot of debris, concrete, metal, timber. That's all going to be removed. It's going to be pulled back. We don't plan on excavating, you know, stones out of that area to recover them. If they're just on the surface, we'll pull them back. And the thought is that the salt marsh would be able to hopefully recolonize in that area. You know, we won't leave any divots, obviously, but you know, that's the thought, and pull everything back landward to kind of where you see that vegetative line between the stone and the trail. It'll be within kind of that basic footprint. And I think that's about it that I have.
Couple questions, Dave. When you put the toe stone in, you're going to be doing excavating. That material is going to be removed from the site.
That's correct.
And as far as dewatering, is that an issue? It looks like there's not a lot of room there that you're going to have between deliveries and everything else.
I think we haven't quite gone into the detail of logistics here on construction, but it's going to have to be all, you know, the procedure is going to all have to take place within that rail trail footprint. So that material is going to have to be stockpiled there and dewatered. Obviously, we're not going to be doing the work in a condition where you see that photo now. It's going to be done, even though we're above the high tide line, it's still going to be done when the tide is not high there. Obviously, we need to be able to dig down to set those toe stones.
And the elevation at the top of this, that is the FEMA, is that the still water level? I mean, what about run up and so forth? How does that all tie together?
The Stillwater, 100-year Stillwater elevation at the site is 8.9. So when you take into account wave setup and wave action due to coastal storm event, it adds about 5.3 feet. So with run up at the site, it's about 14.2 feet, which is pretty close to the 14. Obviously in the northern end where we're transitioning down from that elevation 14 to 11, it could potentially be overtopped in that area. But that's what we ended up analyzing as far as the wave run up.
What about at the southern end at Water Street? What elevation is that, and will there be overtopping there?
I believe at where, as Jordy had indicated, I believe there's going to be about a 6 to 12 inch buildup from the existing in that point. Jordy can correct me on that, but our wave run-up calculation was only associated with the stone revetment, not for the existing wall that's there now. We're not doing any changes to that wall that's there at the southern end.
Okay. And the southern end, if I just might jump in, the southern end there, you know, we're doing a balancing act of going from Water Street and the existing conditions of the property in that vicinity. And then as we get close to the wastewater treatment plant, that's where we're ramping up to the 14 and a half foot height. So although there's the house and the artist studio there at the southern end next to Joppa, that's not the sort of critical infrastructure that we've been focused on protecting with the revetment and the berm height. So coming back to the existing height of Water Street, which is 13 and a half, that's where we ended up.
And there hasn't been a history of running over that, I don't think.
Correct.
Okay.
And in the narrative, it says it's a rough face. You had mentioned Cashman Park before, which is a pretty smooth face. Is this, how would you compare the revetments, Dave?
It won't be a smooth face like Cashman Park or, the Kane revetment further upriver. It will be more like the one that was done recently on the other side of the American Yacht Club for National Grid. It'll be a rough face finish. I know our drawings and our cross sections kind of show, sort of a smooth face or a pretty uniform template there, but the intent is to have a rough face on it.
Okay.
So how much rise in sea level can this withstand before it becomes a problem?
So I might just jump in that the focus has been on the wastewater treatment plant, which has the FEMA base flood elevation of 12 feet. So we're looking to build the revetment to 14 and the berm and then the trail to 14 and a half. So we have essentially 2.5 feet of above the wastewater treatment plant's existing FEMA level. The projections that the Dewberry was drawing on, the so-called NOAA intermediate high projections for 50 years from now, was sea level rise of between 1.5 and 2 feet. 50 years has been generally considered the service life of the wastewater treatment plant. So that was part of the thinking going into the height of the thing. Part of the goal here with this initiative is that this project is part of a phased approach to protection of the treatment plant. So after we do this, the next phase is going to be designing and permitting and building flood walls going back to Water Street, and then really the next step, we'll have to see whether a pump station is needed inside, but the next step is going to be, over the coming years, is some sort of feasibility study and analysis of what will we do in a few decades. Will we be looking to raise all this equipment up, which is a fairly expensive process and has its own challenges with what happens to the plant's capacity and operations and so forth while you're doing all that rewiring and everything. Or are we raising up the whole neighborhood, the street, and all the private property and the houses that are tied up against Water Street? Those are some big challenges. But so no one really has any particular answers for those broader questions. Part of what we're doing here is taking into account the existing vulnerability, giving ourselves a little bit of leeway for projected sea level rise, and buying ourselves time to figure out what we do in the coming decades to address those questions as we get to actual sea level rise. Steve, is that a sufficient answer?
Yeah, that I think answers my question.
Great.
Is there any kind of estimate on how much salt marsh will recolonize that area? It seems like a pretty big area where the stones are that are going to get pulled in.
Yeah, I don't have that square footage off the top of my head here. But I have a chart, actually. Give me a minute and I think I can come up with it. Well, I can certainly get, yeah, I can get back to you on that. We have it divided up into, the different resource areas here as far as coastal beach, coastal bank, the salt marsh. I know that we had calculated at least the debris removal area within that, which I guess that could be considered where salt marsh could potentially recolonize. I can get back to you on the square footage on that.
Sure. Yeah, I was more interested in the likelihood of does salt marsh usually recolonize areas like that?
Well, what we found, and you walk the site, and this picture doesn't really show it too well, but some of the closer up photos where you see the debris and the stones there, you actually see the salt marsh growing all around it, including on the landward side of some of this debris. So, it obviously, as you get further up the slope, it becomes more sporadic and in pockets. But the idea is that, hopefully we can have that recolonize itself, or at least get rid of the debris and the stone that's the debris that's potentially impacting that habitat.
Okay.
I have a question just kind of related to Joe's question about the salt marsh. And when you remove some of the stones and pull back those big old boulders, there's going to be some excavation required in that area that we're talking about, maybe the salt marsh being able to migrate back into. Do you think that or has anyone looked at the possibility of there needing to be some additional soils replaced where you're removing the stones so that it is appropriate for potential salt marsh habitat? Maybe that's a question for Anne, I don't know.
From a constructability point of view, I think, it's going to be a judgment call on which stones, or debris can easily and effectively be removed without causing substantial damage to the salt marsh. In a case where, maybe you're only seeing the top of the stone, you just can assume that, it's going to cause more harm to remove this than it would be, just to leave it. So it's going to be kind of a judgment call in those areas.
That makes sense. I guess I'm also just thinking of in the areas where, that it isn't necessarily a judgment call about damaging the salt marsh, but where you are definitely going to be pulling back some of these large stones. Is there going to be any need to do any repair work to that substrate in order to make it, hospitable for salt marsh migration?
Yes, it will be done in areas where we're real close to the salt marsh. If say an area has say a divot because some debris or stone got removed, they would have to probably hand fill that in. We certainly don't want any machinery out onto that beach. It's all going to be operating from that pathway itself. So maybe with the reach of an excavator, they could get some of the excavated material as a result of constructing the revetment, and possibly, evenly spread it out so that it could create a good base and for the salt marsh to colonize from, or at least, repair areas that.
I think that's important to note. And I think if that can be maybe like added to the specs or the construction documents so that contractors know to do that, so the site doesn't get just sort of left in a way that's really not hospitable to that kind of restoration, that would be great.
Sure.
I have a question, Jordy. The city would be maintaining the catch basins. Is there going to be a regular program to make sure that the catch basins, that they're not blocked and so forth? I mean, that's not many catch basins for that long a distance.
Talking about the catch basins inside the wastewater treatment facility?
I mean,
I think the assumption is that the regular program the DPS has of monitoring and maintaining those catch basins. We'll have the Parks Department responsible for whatever's happening on the sort of rail trail side of the fence, and the DPS will be responsible for what's happening inside the treatment plant.
It just seems a little concerning that the run-up is that close, and And if there wasn't a place for it to exit, at least after the storm, it would be, could get some flooding.
I guess, with the analysis our consultant team has done, plus the review by our own engineering department, they haven't been concerned about that. Given the existing system should be sufficient.
Okay.
Okay. We have any other question?
Yeah, I got with the revetment being built in waves running up against it and then reflecting back. Have you studied what might be erosion on the salt marsh because of that? I mean, right now there's a kind of a gentle slope and a few rocks. What's going to happen with more solid rocks and the energy being reflected back? If you considered that.
Yeah, Dave can speak to that.
Well, the revetment is going to be a rough face, so it is going to dissipate any sort of wave energy coming in, and hopefully any of the water that would be coming down. If the waves are going to be at a point where it's coming up to the top of the revetment at around elevation 14, there's going to be 5 or 6 feet of water over that salt marsh. So any water that comes down as a result of a run up from the revetment is not going to impact the marsh at that location. On lesser storms where it's just barely going to touch the revetment, I don't see that being an impact to the marsh. And there's a good, good portion of that marsh is offset several feet from the toe. Some of it's up close, but some of it's a good distance away.
I think we also have examples to the north and to the south of this section where you have the slope stone revetment and you have healthy salt marsh coming right up to it, and we haven't seen those sort of negative impacts of reflection.
Okay.
Anything else? Well, I'll take silence as a no. Let me ask any comments from the public. No, hearing none. What shall we want to do?
Let's move forward.
Okay.
I see one of the abutters, Wade Barrett, you're the public. Do you have any comment?
Okay.
I guess not.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I have spent some time with speaking about the whole project with Jordy, and I think we're all on the same page, and we're good with the plans as they stand.
Where do you live, Wade?
179 Water Street.
Okay.
So I do appreciate Jordy's attentiveness to all of the details and responsiveness and communication with me. That's been very, very helpful.
Very good. Okay. Okay. Do we have a motion?
Motion to close the
hearing.
Second.
Dave and Steve. Okay. Let's get a roll call. Paul?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
David?
yes.
And I vote yes. Okay. Next item is George Hasseltine, Windward Shaw, 149 State Street. Notice of intent. We're going to continue to the May 5th meeting.
I'm going to sign off. Thanks,
Yes.
everybody. Thank you, Joe,
Okay, thank
Julie, everyone else.
Thanks,
Can we-
Jordy. I'll coordinate with you on this amendment. We have to issue the amended order, and I'll just coordinate with you to make sure you get that and it's all appropriately revised with all the right references to the new plans and everything.
Great. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you later.
You ready?
Can we continue these en masse, or do we have to go through them one by one? Just wondering.
Any comments, Andy?
Yeah, Joe, I noticed at the beginning of the meeting, I think you opened all your hearings at once, so I think it's fine now that you continue any of the items collectively if you'd like.
Okay. Works for us. All right,
Thank you.
I'll read them off and we can get one motion. George Hasseltine, Windward Shaw, 149 State Street, notice of intent. Dan Mortel, Mass DCR, 0 Curzon Road, Mosley Flowering Pond, notice of intent. Gregory Elliott and Candace Mann, 1254 Street, notice of intent. And David Daly, the Daly Group, 8, 10, 12, and 18 Colby Farm Lane, notice of intent. And Holly McDonald, 468th Street, notice of intent. Continue to the May 5th meeting.
Motion to continue all of the named projects to May 5th?
Second.
Yes.
Okay. Paul,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Okay, and get a motion to close the public hearings.
So moved.
Second?
Paul,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Steve, I'm going to put you in charge of enforcement and violations.
Okay.
I'm recusing myself.
Okay, I don't really know what's happening here, so Julia, do you?
Yes. Wait, am I muted here? No. Okay.
No, we can hear you.
Yes. 9 Doe Run Drive. They have done all of the work that was requested of them. They restored the site. They put back in new soils and they planted. And as proof of that, he's provided photographs as well as the receipts for all of the plants that they purchased and installed. So this is really on the agenda so that the enforcement order can be lifted. And I figured that we would continue it just because I believe that I had forwarded you the photographs of the receipts and of the plantings, but I'm not sure that you all have it in front of you or that you want to handle this tonight. It could easily be continued until the meeting as well. And I can reset.
When did you send them, Julia? Because I don't remember seeing them. Was it
a
a
while? Yeah,
Okay.
this has to have been back in like January or even December probably at this point. Because there were a few meetings that were canceled for various reasons at various times. And then there was one where I wasn't there in February. And now, of course, we're in this situation. So it got put back on the agenda a couple months ago so that the enforcement order could be lifted based on that evidence of the compliance. And we've just been continuing to move it forward.
Julie, have you been out to this?
remember seeing them.
Have you been able to visit?
I have not actually done the site visit where I have gone back onto the site and seen it because, as you may have been able to tell, it was difficult to nail them down, and I continue to not be able to get them on the phone or get a time from them to go out there. So that's why he sent me the photographs with the receipts. The last time he was in, he had showed us the pictures of the plantings, and we were wanting evidence that it was done when he had said it was done. So that's why he provided the receipts with the dates on them and the things like that. So I feel comfortable at this point that it has been accomplished based on the photographs and his receipts from the purchase of the plant.
Well, I'll make a motion to lift the enforcement order.
Can I get a second?
Get over there to look at that first. I mean, given the history that's happened here with the particular property, I don't know. I hate to be skeptical, but
We can wait till May 5th. That's perfectly fine, and I can try and get out there between now and then. It's tricky given what's going on, not just with that particular family and getting a hold of them anyway, but with obviously the COVID thing.
Okay,
Sure.
Drive by.
I've driven by. The problem with driving by, going down their driveway, is that there's sort of like a wall of vegetation before you can see into the area where they had the pool. So it's really hard to see that ground surface from any kind of distance. You really need to get right back there.
We're not proposing to fine them or anything in the interim, so there's no particular urgency to it.
There's no urgency to this one, no.
Could we ask DPS to take their drone and fly over it?
I could certainly ask them to do that again. I don't think that would be a problem. Why don't we do this? We can postpone this until May 5th. And in the meantime, I will either be able to get out there or we'll get another drone photo. How about that?
Okay.
I mean, it would seem to me that if they just grant you permission, you don't even need to with anybody. You just go, you walk down, and look, and, you wouldn't have to be close to anybody. One of my concerns is we don't really know how much sand they put in there. They sort of avoided the subject. You can clearly see from the image on the screen, they put sand down there to create this pool. They remove it, or did they just plan over it? I don't know. I'm not particularly comfortable.
I'll re-forward you all the photos that we have and the receipts, and you can take a look at the photos again and see how comfortable you feel with them. And I will do my best to get out there and get more photographs between now and then. I understand what you're saying, Dan, and I completely agree with you that it's that does look like they placed down quite a bit of sand on top of that wetland. So we want to make sure that has been addressed.
Yeah, seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll continue this to the next meeting then.
I guess I'll motion to continue.
Second.
Okay, Dave?
Yeah.
Yes or no? Or
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Okay, and I'll vote yes.
Okay, then. Next item are orders of conditions. First one's please read Newburyport Parks Department, 40 Low Street.
Yep. So for 40 Low Street special, did you all have any special conditions that you wanted in addition to the boilerplate?
I didn't have
so.
No, I think
I
we're
didn't
all.
see anything. So if you're good with that, we'll just use boilerplate.
Yeah, that's good. It sounds like.
Motion to issue an order of conditions for 40 Low Street.
Second.
Excuse me, do we first have to accept the variance?
Oh,
Oh, yes,
Is that-
we do.
It doesn't matter. The order doesn't matter. I suppose you could do it in either order.
Oh, okay.
Oh, shall
Then
we?
I'll second issuing the order.
Okay. Paul,
Yes?
Steve,
yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Dan,
Yeah.
David,
Yes.
and I will vote yes on the issuing of the variance.
So moved.
I'll move to issue the variance and accept the findings as proposed.
Second?
Okay, Paul,
Yes?
Steve,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay. The next item is Graham Sharp, 9K Street, notice of intent or order condition.
Okay, for this one, I have a draft that has our Plum Island special conditions related to things like no, any fill brought to the site shall consist only of approved beach grade sand, etc. No construction material is stored or stockpiled on dune grass or, let's see, it's the basic standard special conditions for Plum Island. And then you wanted as an additional special condition, the requirement that at least 200 square feet of native Plum Island vegetation shall be in the proposed planting area. And a revised planting plan shall be presented to the conservation administrator prior to start of work.
Sounds good.
Yeah, you said vegetation. It doesn't mean beach grass, so they could plant some native shrubs or whatever if they wanted.
Unless you want it to be strictly dune grass or beach grass, you can.
No, I think
that.
anything that's native is fine.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I've
Make a
also got a
motion.
special condition that no lattice or other enclosures shall be installed around the deck's pilings. The area below the deck shall be left completely open.
Sounds good.
Motion to issue that order of conditions?
Second,
Okay, Paul,
Yes?
Steve,
yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Dan. Was that a yes, Dan? You're breaking up a little bit.
Yep. Yes.
Okay. David,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay. Next one is Jordy Vining, Clipper City Rail Trail Phase 2.
So this one, there were some special conditions already in the existing order, the original order of conditions. And they may not be all of them appropriate to leave in there now that it's been revised for this particular location. So for instance, there's a special condition that says that the applicant shall conduct at least 2 years of annual monitoring of the bioengineered bank stabilization areas and shall be responsible for any necessary repair or construction of such areas. Any failure or significant deficiency of any of the bank stabilization areas shall be identified and reported to the commission along with a proposal for repair or reconstruction. Well, they're not doing that bioengineered bank stabilization anymore, so I would propose that we delete that special condition from the amended order.
Okay.
Sure.
And then we already have one. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
The one concern I have, and I think David maybe shared the concerns about the catch basins and the stormwater management, I just found, I wanted to be persuaded that they'd really taken a hard look at whether what is out there is going to be sufficient, but I never got the impression that they had. I don't know whether anyone shares my concern about that, and I don't know whether we want or need to do anything about it right now, but I mean, they're in the early stages of really planning this thing.
Yeah, that was a concern that I had too. But, so I think maybe filing for more amendments later on, or what? Because there did seem to be a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying with that, and I agree. It sounds as though the stormwater management design for that area is not final yet, because they're still actually doing some survey work out there to make sure that what they have conceptually proposed will even work. So I get exactly what you're saying. I think possibly the way to handle that is that we've got a condition that requires that any changes made to the plans have to be brought back before Conservation Commission for approval. So that's one of
Well, that's fine. That's fine if they propose the changes, but I'd like to know that the 2 catch basins or whatever it is, and the outfalls, which they don't really know exactly how well they work, I'd like to know that it all works, and it's going to be sufficient.
Would you like to require a written approval from the city engineer on the stormwater design prior to issuance of the order?
Yeah, and the functionality of it.
It seems like there's sort of a lead into this with the fact that Bryant is still doing more surveys. So maybe tying that together, that based on the survey, some statement that the drainage system is sufficient and that the city will monitor it in so that it functions.
Yeah, something like that I think would give me some comfort anyway.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. How about that the applicant shall provide final surveyed elevation or final stormwater drainage system design to the commission for approval prior to, do you want to?
Well, and to me, it's proof of functionality more than just a design. If these outfalls aren't really working. At one point, David said, the consultant said, "Oh, well, there isn't really much runoff from these things." Well, what does that mean? Does that mean they work, or there just doesn't happen to be much water coming that way, or they don't work?
So what about a written approval from the city engineer that the stormwater design for the rail trail is sufficient to handle the proposed revised project design, as well as future projected stormwater management needs?
Well, it seems to me, I'm not an engineer, but it seems to me if a catch basin traps water and then it runs through a pipe to go somewhere else, you could pump water into the catch basin and see what happens. Does it work? Does it go?
They said that they had done that they had been out there with DPS and tested the flow through these catch basins and outfalls.
Oh, maybe I missed hearing that then.
Yeah,
okay.
He said that they did that with DPS and that they were found to be sufficient, and that DPS and the city engineer believed that the existing outfalls were going to be sufficient to handle this new design. Now, what they were saying in addition to that, though, was that they still need to do some additional survey work to just make sure that the flows are going to work properly.
Okay. All right. Well, then maybe I'll withdraw my concerns. I don't believe I heard them say that they'd been out there and they'd actually tested it and it worked.
Are the catch basins within the sewage treatment plant?
Yes, I believe they are.
2 of them are.
Yeah.
So presumably, if they don't work, the sewage treatment plant's going to get flooded, and they'll fix it in a hurry.
They have to
Well,
work.
either that or there's not much water that collects there now, but that doesn't mean there won't be when the revetment is built and,
Yeah.
you know.
The
Yeah.
key is to make sure that the water can get back out if once it gets in, that it can get back out from behind the berm and the trail.
Right.
So I think it's in everyone's best interest to make sure that happens. And I think if you require that the city engineer provides a written statement that he's approving this proposed stormwater design for the rail trail, then I think that that would probably cover it.
All right.
Yeah.
And that any revisions to the stormwater design need to be provided to the commission, along with, you know, that approval from the city engineer.
Yeah.
And more or less just a finalization now that they're doing an additional survey as well.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, they did request that we put in a special condition about them providing us later on a final planting plan.
Yep. Okay, so we can also say that a final planting plan shall be provided to, let's say we'll call it a final landscape plan shall be provided to the commission prior to the start of work. And we already have a condition in here which states that, let's see, the applicant shall conduct at least 2 years of annual monitoring of each of the planting schedules within the wetland resource areas and identified on the landscape plans. For each planting area, if 75% cover of approved non-invasive plants is not achieved by the end of the 2-year period, the applicant shall replace plants as necessary. And this monitoring shall be conducted by a qualified landscape architect or wetland ecologist, etc. So we've got that in there as well.
Okay, and do we need one for monitoring of the salt marsh? Or is that already in there?
I don't know that that's actually part of what is their scope of work for this. I think they're not going to be impacting the salt marsh, the existing salt marsh. And so.
Yeah, well, I thought that, when they were talking about pulling back some of the stones, they said there might be some impact and they would have to refill.
Well, what we could say is that any damage to areas adjacent to the existing salt marsh caused by removal of the revetment stone shall be restored with additional soils by hand if necessary.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Can we get a motion?
Make a motion to issue the amended order of conditions?
Second.
Hey, Paul,
Yes?
Steve,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
and I vote yes.
Okay.
And that is what we got.
I got one question.
Yes.
Where do we stand on getting replacements?
It appears we stand pretty good. There were 3 applicants for the 2 openings, or soon to be openings. Sorry, Doug. So as Julie and I commented to Donna, there seem to be 2 very, very highly qualified applicants. And I think Donna, can't pronounce her last name, Donna's assistant, was going to discuss it with the mayor, and maybe we'll see one of them on the next city council agenda.
Excellent.
Good.
What's the background on them?
One woman was, trying to remember, she was a conservation commissioner, and she is, I think I
Extensive
can,
in all variety of environmental fields. In particular, was it not remediation work that she had been involved in?
it could have been.
We can forward you all the resumes once they are, I believe, I don't know if I think it's probably allowed. We can ask Donna if it's okay to forward you their resumes once they're selected. Andy, do you have any comment on that? Is that allowed?
Could you, sorry, I was muted. Could you just repeat the question again?
Just wondering, the commissioners are wondering about, we have 3 applicants for 2 open spots on the commission right now, and 2 of the applicants are actually highly qualified and hopefully would be approved by the mayor and the city council. We were just wondering, is it possible to send their resumes out to the rest of the commissioners, or is that something that's like confidential?
Oh, no, that's fine. And actually the resumes are typically included in the council packet when the appointments are made. So, as background.
Okay, great. Then we'll forward them out to everybody.
Okay.
Okay. Julie, you want to do that? Or you want me to do it?
I can do it. I'll do it tomorrow.
Okay. So, Douglas, say hi to your dog after, Doug, will you?
Yeah, I was just gonna get her to come up to the screen and say goodbye.
Oh, yeah.
Emma, come on, come here.
It's your party.
Here she is. Oh, come on, Emma. Here's Emma.
Oh,
Hi, Emma.
She just wants to go out.
yeah.
And so doesn't her daddy.
Actually, I think like all dogs, she's pretty tired of going for walks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
I know.
get the feeling and say, oh no, not the leash again. I don't want to go out anymore.
Yeah, I've seen more dogs walking by our house than I've ever seen before.
Oh my God.
Right.
And the trails are crazy out there too.
That's right. That's right.
Especially around the Little River area. There's people everywhere. Well, Douglas, thank you for 9 years of service.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure, except for some of those really long ones, but it's the way it goes. It's been a pleasure working with all of you, and I'll stop in and say hello at some point when we're back to the new normal.
Yeah.
Right.
That would be
And
nice.
Ted, I just want to also say an extra thanks for all the work that you did on the Plum Island brochure, because we would not have gotten that done without you. You spearheaded
Yeah.
it.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
That was amazing.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Yeah, it was great to
Welcome,
have that
Doug.
done. Yeah. All right. Well, good luck and good hunting.
You want to make Doug, you want to make the final motion?
Oh, yes. That's great. Yes, I'll move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Oh, wait a minute. Paul,
Yep.
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
I will vote yes. Doug?
Yes. Just one final thought. I think the roll call is not a bad idea generally, even when you get back to the real world. I think it might help Gretchen in terms of, catching, or if she's listening to a recording and trying to do the minutes from a recording, it might be good to actually have a roll call every time there's a vote. I know maybe sounds like it's burdensome, but I don't think it really is.
Yeah.
Not really.
There's very few no votes
Right.
or abstentions, so. But we'll
Good
take
idea.
we'll take it under advisement.
Absolutely. Good. All right. Well, good night, all.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Andy.
Okay.
All right. We're out. Over and out.